Welcome to the second hour. And today is Thursday, January 16th, 2025. And we hope that everybody else is getting in easier than I am on the studio. And it says we have 3 listeners, so we welcome you to the show. If you call in, or if you if you're on the app, down at the bottom there is a little icon of a phone, and you click that and it puts you in queue to talk to us. And there's also a space for you to enter comments. So we hope that you take advantage of that and let us know what you're thinking or how we can help you. And I'm now going to turn, oh, he's not quite ready yet, so we'll give Michael just a minute. And if everything is coming through clear, somebody send me a text or a line and let me know. I appreciate it. There's no comments, no callers. So I think I have finally caught up with all of the shows that we played while we were gone, the 2 weeks. And so you can get those, you can go to our website and click on the microphone and still go to the archives for 2024 in December and 2025 January. And I have links both to our Podetize player and also to the YouTube. And so you can pick up the archives from there. And hopefully all that is seamless. And like I said, I've just now kind of got caught up with all the ones we were gone for 2 weeks. And I believe I have them all up there. If there's something missing, please let me know. I'll see what I can do about getting it on the website. The Podetize, we have a player, and I've actually put a link to the player in each day. So I say, you know, you can listen to this on YouTube, and I give you the YouTube link, or I say you can go to the player and listen to the archives. And those will pop up. It takes just a minute for it to get in queue, but then it'll pop up by day, and it'll say whether it's the second hour or the first hour. And anyway, you can pick them up from there. And so Michael is now ready. I'm going to hand him the microphone.
Awesome. And thank you, everybody, for being here. Delighted to move forward to the next step in this conversation about first century Aramaic forgiveness. And pardon us our glitches yet as we learn how to operate during our transition. We are not fully transitioned yet, but we're working on it. And learning in the meantime more and more about technology. As we uncover the nuances of the Needle Studio and how all of our archives are going to be stored. That's something that's in process. We're working on it, and all things are rock and roll. So delighted that you're here. And one of the things that comes to me, and I want to cover actually some material that I wrote several years ago. When I say several, well, before I do that, let's just see if we've got anybody with a question in mind. If you're out there and you have a question for us, if you push on the left-hand side of your screen, if you push the call button, and then you look down a little lower, you'll see call. You hit that button, and that should set up a notification in my phone here, and I will know that you want to talk to us. So let me know if that happens. And I've got one more phone transition to make. Just give me 1 second here to move this phone. I'm handling 2 phones through the process, so what fun. What fun. So in an article that I wrote, I'm not even sure now, about probably 27 or 28 years ago, I asked a question. And the question was, why wouldn't the soldier who discovers that his quote-unquote enemy is not really his enemy, why would he not just walk away from the act of war making? And in the book, in my book, Why Is This Happening to Me Again, which you can download from our website. If you just go to whyagain.org/book, you can download it in any one of 9 different languages. So in chapter 18, the character Richard kind of asks a similar question. He says, when speaking about the world of pain, of trauma, of drama, of suffering, he says, who promotes this insanity? Why is there so much confusion in the world? And so the objective of this article was to extend some of the conversations with Richard beyond the book. If you're not familiar with my book, Why Is This Happening to Me Again? It's a conversation between myself and a real fictional character. When I say real fictional, every story in the book is true. It's something that I've gone through with someone, and they're a composite from different people that I've worked with over the decades that have uncovered issues. And for convenience in the book, I have a conversation with this character, Richard, who has, of course, all of these issues. So we get to address and look at how to shift and how to change the mind energy behind it. And one of the key things I think to be aware of when doing this work is the recognition, and it's probably one of the greatest atrocities done to us as human beings down through the ages, is we've had hidden from us the fact that we are by nature creators. That is the nature of the human being. Made in the image and likeness of the Creator, we are creators. And so if, and I think I mentioned this yesterday, the purpose of the world is to kick us in the limitation. And kick us in the kindest way you could imagine, because when the world dances to the tune of pain that we're holding somewhere in our structure, conscious or unconscious, that energy that is creating the pain is creating a warning signal. Pain's just a message that is designed to make your ears grow, to get you to listen to what you're doing to yourself. And so if I hold a painful energetic pattern within me, by definition, energy is motion. And whatever I hold is literally being in motion. Motion creates an energy wave. Imagine that I'm standing underwater with a bucket of water in my hand. I've got my arm outstretched and I'm spinning around as fast as I can. If you could see what was happening when that bucket moves through the water, what would you see? You'd see waves going out in all directions. So imagine that the bucket that I'm holding in my hand is an electron in my mind that is holding a particular energy that is causing my pain. That bucket moving creates a wave literally in all directions in the water, upside of the bucket, downside, left, right, forward, backward. There's a wave coming off that spinning bucket, moving in all directions. Everything that you hold in your mind, again, it's energy. If there were no motion, there would be no energy. So everything we hold is energy, and the motion, like the bucket moving, creates a wave. Life's purpose is to respond to the waves that you send out. And so recognizing that, rather than blaming and puking on everybody who happens to show you what you have created in your life that is painful to you, when we start to accept and receive what's happening in our world, our individual world and our collective world, as a reflection, that if the events in the world resonate, some form of pain or trauma in us, that means just one thing. There is some form of pain or trauma in us. Now, you can do one of two things. You can ignore it and blame somebody else for it, or you can own it and go to work with and change it. So my offering is that everything that resonates, anything that is less than love in each of us, resonates or intensifies, amplifies through resonance that information that perhaps we've been hiding from ourselves. And once we take ownership for what's moving in us, then we have the opportunity to review the mind energy with which we are literally creating things like aging, suffering, and death. Everything is an opportunity to do that. You know, the most distant, horrific thing that you can imagine happening, if you go, oh, hold my breath and suffer over it, it's not because of that thing in the world that you're suffering, it's because there's suffering in you. And so the objective of this work is to recognize if there's suffering in me. For the moment, I want to let go of my conversation about what's happening out there, and I want to step inside myself and have a conversation about what's happening in here, what's happening inside of me. And when I have that conversation, I then am able to see the hidden, the dissociated parts of my own mind. Remembering that dissociation is a result of denial. And denial is the act of thinking or speaking as though something outside of me is the cause of what's moving inside of me. The cause of what's moving inside of me is the fact that whatever that is that's moving inside of me is inside of me. If I'm having a conversation about what's happening outside of me when I'm in pain, then I'm going to tend to be stuck in my pain. If I try to massage what's going on inside of me so that it feels better, I'm still in some state of dissociation. So our invitation is to go directly to the mastermind, the mind that was called the mind of Christ, the mind of active present love, and deal from that perspective with whatever's going on inside of me. And if it is painful and traumatic, then I want to review the mind energy with which I'm creating my life at this point, even though I say, well, I'm only upset because the fires are happening in LA. No, you're upset because there's upset in you, and your mind can put them on the fires in LA. The same way as yesterday it put it on this, and 2 years ago it put it on that, and 20 years ago it put it on that, and 50 years ago it put it on that. Everything is an invitation to review what your mind energy is and what you're creating with. So in the conversation with Richard, in chapter 14 in the book, we talk about what I identify as the priestcraft, contrasted by the priesthood, who use the same teachings to liberate. So the priestcraft, what we talk about in chapter 14 with Richard in the book, is that the priestcraft are those who would take, let's say, someone's dissociated pain and trauma, reinforce it, take advantage of it, and use it to take control of them. Where the priesthood would take exactly the same situation and utilize it to support someone being liberated from their pain. So the priestcraft use everything to move control in their own direction. And so the tactics include things like deceit, changing the meaning of words, sowing seeds of division among people, threat, fear. And each of those methods, in a mind where one is not fully conscious, will tend to promote confusion. And a confused mind is always much easier to control and keep in obedience, even if the obedience goes against one's own knowing, against one's own will and choice. These tactics that the priestcraft use, if negative realities are present in a mind, will tend to elicit in that mind realities of confusion, fear, guilt, hate, etc. The solution to that dilemma in the ancient Aramaic is always forgiveness. Now, there are lots of methodologies that people can use to help themselves to feel better. But if I use a methodology to help myself to feel better around a piece of mind energy that is of a disintegrative nature, I find a way to assuage my guilt. Well, gee, I feel better, therefore this must be good. Or have I just created another level and another piece of avoidance instead of going to the core tool of, oh, here's this energy in me, I think I will remove it. And so when we talk about forgiveness, we are not talking about letting somebody else off the hook for what's happening inside of you. When we talk about forgiveness, we're talking about owning and working through whatever's happening inside of you yourself. And so taking responsibility for what's going on within one's mind, owning it, and then recognizing that if it is of a quality that does not support my wholeness and my living as the presence of love, then it's time for me to throw it out. Not let others off the hook, which the Greeks call forgiveness, but literally time to throw that out of my own mind, to get rid of my confusing and confounding realities. Now, when you realize the mind is an energetic device, yes, it works in pictures, so we tend to think of it all being about pictures, but that isn't the truth at depth. What the mind works with is energy. And if there are conflicting energies within a mind, then there's going to tend to be confusion in that mind, and that's what the priestcraft takes advantage of. And let's use that, let's look at an example of that in the world of physics that helps to create a metaphor to make more sense of it. Imagine I have my standard 4x8 whiteboard in front of me, and I take a blue marker and I mark, I put a circle on the board that's blue, and I take my red marker and I put a circle on the board that's red, and I take a green marker and I put a circle on the board that's green. We look at the board and I say, oh, well, see, there's red, blue, and green. It's very clear that there are three different colors. Now, we know from a scientific point of view that color is just an interpretation of the mind of a particular frequency. That's why some people are colorblind, because they interpret a given frequency differently than most other minds. But I say I've got clarity on red, blue, and green, but if I were to take my marker and put them on the center circle and do, scribble on it in red, scribble on it in blue, scribble on it in green, would I have clarity on any one of those colors? No, obviously the three colors are going to mix together. The frequencies mix together, and together they create confusion. Whenever I'm in a state where I have some form of mind energy that is lower than the highest and best that I can hold, and if I'm bringing truth into my mind at the same time, those two frequencies, those two energies are going to tend to mix, and the result is going to be confusion. Applying forgiveness removes the interfering energetic patterns so that only one frequency is left, and that is frequencies that are based in active present love. That's how to get rid of confusing and confounding realities. Now, when negative realities come to the surface, they can only come to the surface if they're within the mind in the first place. And if you're in a condition, you're rolling along and you're feeling connected and, love is present and you're rocking, and something shows up in the environment that resonates something less than that presence of love, then your emotional state changes. And in the ancient Aramaic, the word love represents a state of being, not sexual athletics and not some kind of an attraction to someone else. It is the definition of your actual human life, and it is maintaining the presence of your human life in your mind no matter what that is the key to both intelligence and choice. And notice that, if you've ever done something that you regret, notice that that regret always came from a state other than love. In the ancient teachings, they understood that hostility and fear came from corrupt, compromised data in the mind, and that corruption degrades intelligence and reasoning ability. You go back 2,000 years and you remember Paul, who had some powerful insight, but when it comes down to the core teachings of the Master, he's blind and confused about his own process. Even Paul. And he says, why is it the things I would do, I cannot do, and the things I would do are not what I do? He's confused. What's going on? At another point, he indicates some approach to the solution when he says we see as though through a glass darkly, i.e., we're seeing through a confused mind. And when we're in a confused mind, there's an inability to make good choices. And that's one of the reasons why you want to address, like, the very instant you become even slightly available of mind energy that is off base with your human nature. You're rolling along in the day and somebody goes by and up comes a destructive thought, an angry thought, a sad thought, a hateful thought, a fearful thought, whatever. Most people go, oh, well, I'll just go on. I'll ignore that. I'll do some positive thinking here. No, that's premature positive thinking, and premature positive thinking is a disease. If you notice that some circumstance or situation in your life resonates an energy that's less than love in you, that means there's an energy that's less than love in you, and you want to dump it. You want to get rid of it. It will not serve you to hold on to that. So here's Paul, who is considered to be, one of the most profound carriers of the message of Yeshua. My offering is, no, he really didn't carry the message of Yeshua. He carried the message of Paul. And here he acknowledges that he doesn't know how to maintain the condition of love in his mind. He doesn't know how to maintain solid choices. He doesn't have the key to dealing with his own confused mind. He did not comprehend what was perhaps the most important instruction, the core of the work of Yeshua, who knew exactly how to keep charge of the source of his own thinking. Yeshua knew. Remember, he said, I'm in this world, but I'm not of this world. I don't allow the sensory information that comes in to take me over, because there's nothing in me that is less than love to be taken or resonated by the world. There's a passage in one of the texts that was not canonized where the disciples are with Yeshua and the Pharisees are railing on Yeshua, and the disciples, in their hostility, said, Yeshua, something to the effect, kind of like, why don't you sock it to them? Why don't you give them back some of their own medicine? Yeshua says, I have none of that in my store. If a circumstance in the world can resonate some form of hostility or fear in me, how is that possible? It's only possible if I have it in my store. And what we hear Yeshua saying is, if it's in your store, get rid of it. Forgive. Apply forgiveness to remove that energetic pattern. Otherwise, that energetic pattern moving in you will eventually, through resonance, call somebody into your space to be in your face doing it to you again. So Paul, not understanding how to clean the confusion in his own mind up, obviously couldn't teach others to do it. And notice how many people are trying to clean up this area of their lives, relying on the understanding of Paul, who didn't know how to clean up his own life. So Paul brought a powerful comprehension to spiritual process, but to properly honor Yeshua's teachings on how to heal a confused mind, you got to let go of Paul. A mind without a condition of love in it is a mind that does not have charge of itself. And if you want to control someone, what would be the easiest way to do it? There's the priestcraft, so realities of deceit, confusion, fear, separation, hostility in the minds that you want to control. And sadly, that's what a lot of the world's games are about, whether it's business, government, churches. You know, if the preacher wants his next, his fourth $1 million jet, he's got to find a way to milk people's pockets. So I asked Richard the question in this article. So, what would be the easiest way to do it? He says, well, you'd sow that deceit. You'd do your best to take control of language and education. You'd create confusion around the meaning of words. You'd probably keep people believing there's an enemy to fight and that it's macho and heroic to kill them. And you'd paint the person who won't play the macho game, who won't fight the enemy or call another the enemy, you'd call him a traitor or an idiot. And then if you wanted to keep people in their place or take control of them, all you need to do is set up a circumstance that resonates that confusion and the implanted emotions and realities that authorities use, that the priestcraft uses to control people. And that way you'd have them right where you want them. So that's an age-old tactic, and the resolution and the solution is each time, each instant, each second where something less than love comes up in a mind, you take responsibility and you forgive. And I see Sharon has made a note. I had a wonderful experience of attending one of your workshops at John 23rd. My goodness, that's got to be 2.5, 3 decades or more ago. I just actually talked to Father Keith about 2 weeks ago. He's still doing well. And you're saying that was before the book was written, so that's prior to 1995. Goodness sake, Sharon, glad you're back. And so when you realize that there are those who would purposely, consciously instill in a mind and then use what's been instilled to jerk somebody's chain, then you recognize there's an identifiable group of people who specialize in that kind of deceit and control. So the priestcraft's tactics can be found in any area of life: education, business, family, media, military, politics, government, and in religions as well. And that example that I used at the opening of our session, it's a good example. Why wouldn't someone, when they discover this person is not their enemy, this person's a father or mother with a family just like them in the community, why would they not just walk away from war? Notice that the military, political, and media priestcraft taunt and scourge those who function lovingly. It's interesting, JFK made a statement at one point that our culture wasn't going to change until the conscientious objector was as respected as the warrior. That might be one of the reasons why they got rid of him. He was looking to sow and support human life. in the world. A world that the priestcraft owned and kept the battle going. So the ridicule of the conscientious objector, thank you, the one who says, I'm not going to kill, can be subtle, it can be blatant, especially if you're a man in this culture, although this is being transferred into the realm of women as well. You know, for a man, if they won't go to war, their manhood's called into question. If you're not ready to go to war at the drop of a hat, to think for yourself and stop killing those you discover are not your enemies would, in this culture, open you to being ridiculed as naive, a coward, traitor, a deserter. And just the thought of that result, it's been so instilled in people's minds, would stop the average person from making an independent assessment and taking independent action, though the independent action in their minds is the right thing to do. And there you have that mass confusion. One of the philosophers from the last century, and I'm not remembering what his name was, but he was a conscientious objector. And there was a bill being passed by his local government that was going to be abusive to the population, and he stood up. Again, I'm not remembering what his name is, but in any event, it's what he had to say that was so powerful. The local politicians put him in jail. And another of his friends came to visit him and said to him, "What are you doing in here?" And this philosopher said, "No, the question is, what are you doing out there? Why aren't you standing up for what is right instead of kowtowing to what you've not forgiven in yourself as yet?" And sadly, history is littered with the bodies and reputations of the few who had the courage to stand in the face of the mass mind, to stand up to insanity and declare peace. Even the religious priestcraft, supposedly in the name of the Prince of Peace, have said, you know, when he instructed, have Rahma for those who hate you, that is, be the presence of love for anyone. Supposedly their representatives, people who really are presented as committed to really putting forward the teachings of this man named Yeshua, said, "Oh, it's your job to kill. You've got to go defend." I remember an intensive, this goes back about 40 years ago, and there was a young man who'd been to Vietnam, and he was really touching into some of the pain that he'd experienced there. And he just went really, think about it, I have to breathe, kind of berserk. He had been drafted, and he was a Catholic. And he went to his parents and said, I can't do this. We've been taught, thou shalt not kill. And his parents said, "Well, son, it's your job." He said, "No, that doesn't make sense. That's not what we've been taught." So they took him to his priest. And his priest said, "Son, it's your job." So he answered and went to war. I can't describe the level of pain that he shared in that workshop when he spoke about the first life that he took on the battlefield. And somehow or other, he ended up with the wallet of the man that he had killed. And in this man's wallet was his membership card to the Catholic Church. In this article, Richard answers me, well, to think we could survive without killing the bad guys of the world is naive, he says. And I offer him the definition in the dictionary of naive is an unsophisticated person. And most people would not want to be thought of as unsophisticated, right? Well, Richard replies, well, no, of course not. And then I offer Richard a piece of information. Richard, remember when I spoke about the way words are twisted? Let's look at the original meaning of the word sophistication. The sophists were a group of people who specialized in, quote, adulteration and injuring the purity and genuineness of anything by foreign mixture. They were known for, quote, reasoning that was sound in appearance only, according to the 1853 Webster's Dictionary. That's the definition of a sophist. Now, notice today, everybody wants to be sophisticated. In fact, that's part of the marketing game is, you know, the long cigarette holder and the drink in the hand to sell alcohol and nicotine, along with the 500 chemicals in a cigarette. Sophistication. Adulteration and injuring the purity and genuineness of anything by foreign mixture, reasoning that is sound in appearance only. Richard replies in this article, but we're too intelligent for that, Michael. That kind of deception would soon be discovered and stopped. Yes, or so you would think. Except take a look at the most recent editions of Webster's Dictionary, and the definitions have been changed. There's no reference to the impact of sophistry on mass thought, and education is in the 1859 edition. And I asked Richard the question, do you know the origin of the terms sophomore, junior, and senior in the university system? Well, he says, beginning and advanced levels of study at the university, of course. Did you graduate university? I asked Richard. Oh, yes, of course. And you said we were too intelligent and would discover and stop such deceptions. Notice you went through, Richard, 3 levels of initiation or training in a well-practiced art of the logic of deceit on being a sophister, and you didn't even know what you were being trained in. The 1859 copy of Webster's Dictionary informs us that in several of the Ivy League schools of the day, the second-year student was a junior sophister. The third-year student was a senior sophister. What is a sophomore? An initiate in being trained in the logic of deceit. Richard replies, how dare you? I don't believe a word you're saying. That just couldn't happen. Richard, I see what appears to be hostility. Notice you're succumbing to exactly what was programmed into you in order to blot out the ability to actually reason and see truth. When we're presented with evidence we don't like, we've been brainwashed into creating elevated stress levels. When truth shows up in a mind that's in blockage of truth, a mind that is in deceit, stress is elevated. And the tendency is to want to discredit or in the extreme destroy the messenger to alleviate the increase of stress. Do your own research. How much brainwashing has happened? Just look at some of the older references because most of the modern works have had the truth deleted. How many people have seen their children go off to schools and universities become strangers to their own families and nobody understood why? What would you do if you knew that sophisters, probably so wooed by their own social deceit that they did not know themselves what they're doing, controlled the education of your children? Well, I'd homeschool them, of course. And then Richard has this aha moment. Oh, now I understand the bad rap that homeschooling gets and why homeschool kids have such a different energy about them. The sophistry that's taken a hold of the culture is not perpetrated on the homeschooled child. Though, don't you need to send kids to school to be socialized? Richard took a deep breath. Yes, and if you look out of a report that comes out of California, I believe it was one of the big city police departments, Los Angeles, if I remember correctly, in the 1950s. The major problems in the school system were chewing gum, talking in the halls, throwing paper on the floor. That's the 1950s. That's an actual police report. In the 90s, the problems were murder, drugs, teen pregnancy, suicide, rape, and gangs. Recently, in a Florida school, a 6-year-old child was removed by police in leg irons. Sound like the result of confused minds? And I offer Richard the thought, I believe that mass education in the hands of a few has opened the way for deception inherent in the sophist mind to be diffused into the mass mind. Notice how many adults today, and thank you, Celinda, it was Thoreau and Emerson. And so if we've been programmed with, the point of this whole conversation is, if we've been programmed with conflicted energies and we confront a situation that resonates those energies, instead of just glossing over it and ignoring it, recognize that's an opportunity to clean up your own mind. Because the sophister, in the classic sense, developed the talent of presenting false and deceptive logic. They studied how, by false reasoning and argumentation, to make a false premise appear true. In the sophister's mind, there was no interest in excellence or virtue, no concern for truth or the discussion at hand, only winning the argument, money, fame, social status. It's changed the whole mindset. Sophism is a major influence in many of the philosophies of the world, including the fear and guilt side of most of the religions. And when you really think about how many fields of modern endeavor are really concerned with truth over winning. So each time life gives you the gift of resonating an energy that your physiology goes, wait a minute, what's this? Notice that that's the opportunity to open your own mind and begin the healing process, or advance the healing process. Now, Richard still, in this article, still isn't satisfied with what I'm saying. And, I could identify when I first started researching these topics, oh, no, you don't go there. Well, that's part of the brainwash. Don't go there. How could deception run so deep? And as I watched Richard in this deep thought, I began to think of all the places where, quote unquote, adulteration and injuring the purity and genuineness of anything by foreign mixture applied in our culture. Where in our culture does truth not matter, and has excellence and virtue become irrelevant? Well, pretty much business, success, money, power, fame, at any cost seems to be the byword of the day. And yet that comes at such a deep cost, because one has to give up a mind based in truth and love, which, if you notice in the ancient scriptures, are alternate names for the Creator. Literally, when an energetic pattern at the cause level, that is mind energy, enters into a human field, it creates a discomfort signal. Every discomfort signal is a signal that there's an energy in you that you want to be about forgiving. Not that you want to be out about ignoring, anesthetizing yourself against, just give me a fifth of scotch. But really, truly paying attention to every energy that moves through you. If you find any symptoms of sophism in your own life and you find them distasteful, then find and change those parts of yourself. Each one is a situation where a worksheet becomes appropriate. Each one becomes a call to restore the mind of truth in you. Literally, in the ancient Aramaic language, when they spoke about the mind of Christ, that's what they were talking about. That each of us is born to have access to, this is one of the pieces Paul did have of the puzzle. He said, Christ in you, that mind of love, that mind of truth in you is your hope. And yet, through this sophistry, many have been eased into a culture of materialism, confusion, and decay. When you do the work of cleaning up your own mind and freeing you from the effects of a culture based in sophistry, then you become a literal elemental force that brings the possibility of change to that culture. And the mind energy of deception has impacted virtually every mind on earth. And it thrives on secrecy and ignorance. And one of the key tools in the process of this facing what is in yourself that needs to be healed is the breath. It's just taking the time to slow down, be aware of what's moving in your own body, and breathe. And the more you acquaint yourself with the breath, the more you will find that you will remove, because the breath is the master solvent that delivers the active presence of love on a tissue level. And so I join you in just allowing yourself to get quiet, close your eyes for a moment if you're in a situation where it's safe to do that. Notice anywhere within your tissue structure that there's any form of stress. And just notice where in your physiology there is any stress. Allow yourself to breathe into it. Oftentimes, one of the reasons we withhold our breath is because there's information stored in the tissue structure that we do not wish to become acquainted with, that we do not wish to deal with. And that leads to the denial of the elemental force that would undo those effects. Remember, they talked about, well, first of all, in the Aramaic, in the creation story, it doesn't say the Creator sent out his spirit. It says the Creator sent out his breath. To deny any part of your tissue structure access by the breath is to weaken that tissue structure, which means it holds on to those energetic patterns that are of a destructive nature. And to deny that tissue breath is to deny it the ability to be alleviated of its pain or its stress. You know, it's been said that those who refuse to investigate the past are condemned to repeat it. We need to be willing to look into what forms our own personal reality structures and those of our culture. You look at the pure Aramaic thought, and then you look at the Greek misinterpretations that have been placed upon it. And so much has been lost. Greek translations of the original Aramaic teachings opened a space for this sophistry to be implanted in people's minds. I remember speaking many years ago to a Kiwanis group up in Lansing, Michigan. A person who had taken on teaching this work was a Kiwanis member there and invited me to come and speak, which I did. And there was a preacher there who had been a preacher for some 50 years, and he did the invocation. And when I finished talking about the Aramaic and that Yeshua's language, his original language was Aramaic, this preacher came up to me afterwards like, you know what? I don't care what Yeshua said. I studied the Greek rendition of the scriptures, and that's all I need to know. And this guy who was supposedly, you know, for 50 years had been supposedly a Christian minister, literally said to me, I don't care what Yeshua said. And the Greek sophists have so destroyed so many of the core ideas, in particular, taken the word forgive and turned it into something that it is not. In the Aramaic, rendering the scriptures, you see plain and simple instructions on how to live life in a way that works most effectively. And once that's translated into Greek, so much of it is lost. And authorities who are in this priestcraft mode use methods purposely to implant fear so that fear can be resonated and draw one out of the intelligence that is their birthright back into subjugation. You know, when you hear the scriptures saying literally hundreds of times, fear not, or some variation on the theme of fear not, and then you hear someone say the beginning of wisdom is the fear of God, you know you're dealing with sophistry. And of course, the message of the authority is don't question our authority. Even the child who asks a parent a reasonable why is often punished by the withholding of explanation in order to reinforce this don't question authority. And so the invitation here is to recognize that any signal that draws you physiologically out of experiencing the active presence of love, which is your created essence, is the opportunity to apply the tool with which to remove that fear, sadness, grief, rage, pain, or trauma, and be restored to the truth of who you are. And the objective of this work is to decode those tools from the Aramaic. You remember we talked about Aramaicisms, a term that I coined to represent our efforts to restore the meaning of the original Aramaic words of Yeshua. So joining you in being restored to the truth of who you are and the willingness to confront everything that leaves you in sadness, grief, lack, pain, or trauma. And the willingness to confront, if there have been sophists in your life who've reinforced those things, to confront what's been implanted, breathe and apply forgiveness, the tool of removal of everything that never belonged in your human system. The bottom line truth is you are created to be, you are created as the very essence of love. Any message other than that is a lie. And we're here to support you in confronting and forgiving every lie you've ever been told. So I appreciate you joining us. Hold the space for you to have the best year yet of your eternal life. And blessings. Bye-bye. Thanks for joining us.